Alright folks, welcome back everyone. 皆さんお帰りなさい。今日は38日目です。Wednesday 38. Gonna hop right into our lessons now. Our usual routine. Okay. Okay. 禁止。禁止。近所。This one's kind of weak, actually. Okay. 近所。海外。おやすみ。高校生。例。茶。咲く。Oh.幼児。No, 幼児。That one might be a little rough. Piano. Okay. 洗濯. Oh, actually, this might be the new vocabulary word for our Warikani session soon, because we just got taku. Well, actually, makes sense. Zentaku. Zentaku. Oh no, sentaku. Yep. 小学生。Ripe. 熟。Or no, wait, that's not right. Juku, different Juku. That looks like Juku, but the bottom is changed out. Actually, that is a Juku, but this is cram school. I don't recall this. So look for a moment. Yep. Okay. That's actually new. Juku. It does look like a Juku though, the top. Alright. Knife. Sa. Hayashi. Kochi. Okay. Kochi. Wine. Alright. Let's go through again. Something whose length or amount is insufficient in relation to other things within the same group. Opposite of high. Sufficient. Right. Then we wanna okay. For the act of something to be ceased via a rule being put into place against it. Okay. Like prohibiting, forbidden, inhibition, banned. And then we want to look at 인치, 인치. Area which can be considered as one specific location and everything close to it, often used to identify a district or specific set of streets. Right. Neighborhood, vicinity. Injo, injo. Countries or any place located across the ocean. Right, kaigai. Or kaigai, kaigai. Kaigai. Any period of time that is used to recover or take a break from a specific task. All day, day off, sleep, good night. Yasumi. Oh, yasumi. They use honorific. Right. Oh, yasumi. Someone who is in the process of receiving their final level of education before university. Right. Okose. Okose. Okay. The Japanese word to refer to the absence of any number in either the positive or the negative. That's an interesting way to describe it. Re can be represented in two different ways. In this case, they use the script way. Okay. The other way would be on the bottom here. A drink that is made from the infusion of leaves and water may be enjoyed either hot or cold. Right, cha. Sometimes I add an extra stroke in this. That's weird. For a plant to produce flowers or for those flowers to open. Right. Bloom, to rise up. Oh, interesting. Breaking waves. So, right. Saku. Oh, I missed a stroke there. Okay. To have a domestic animal under your care, right? Oh. Okay. Some specific task which needs to be completed or is scheduled to be completed, usually small tasks. So then and stuff, things matter. So yoji. A classical instrument that has many keys and is usually played in a seated position. Okay. Piano. MAKU, you watched back your stream the last time we chatted. You had really good insights despite your uncouth chats. Thanks for that. Okay. You're always welcome. The available options from among several things, or the determination of one of them as being singled out. The availability option amongst it. Okay, I see. Selection. So what is that? Sentaku. Sentaku is A person that is currently receiving their first 6 years of education. Okay. All right. So, 小学生。学 An institution established for the purpose of facilitating extra after-school study for those that need it. This is our new one. Juku. Which uses the shrine. Blade. Dirt. Okay. A sharp utensil primarily used for cutting or slicing. Knife. A type of plant that grows in tufts and covers the surface of the ground. Sa. A grouping of trees that is smaller than a forest and usually stands in a single bunch. Okay. Hayashi. Not that you asked, but you've ended up getting the train back home for this weekend. Only spent 2 days at uni. Oh, okay. But you ended up getting the train back home for this weekend? Interesting. Was it unplanned, or what do you got going on this weekend? Person who instructs people in how to do something, often sports. And then an alcoholic drink based on the fermentation of grapes. Right, wine. Okay. Alright, let's do our stuff here. What? Short. That's how you do it?
母は身長が低い。
Okay. Interesting.
ここで話すのは禁止です。
ここは私の近所です。
ここは海外だ。
仕事のお休みを取る。
私は高校生です。
テストで0点を取る。
Yikes.
この茶はとてもおいしい。
花が咲く。
猫を2匹飼う。
用事をする。
ピアノを弾く。
僕にはそれを選択する勇気がないです。
私の息子は小学生です。
塾に行く。
Oops.
このナイフは彼のものです。
この草は緑色です。
この林は広いです。
あのコーチは怖いです。
夜にワインを飲む。
Okay. Alright. Let's look at our reviews. 157. We're gonna crunch like 100 of them or so because we want to also wrap our P5X 3.2 thing. It was unplanned. When you got to uni, you realized that you had forgotten some things, but it was mainly to rectify a wrong. Your granddad is one of the only orrery makers left in the UK, and he's writing a book about it, right? You mentioned that. For that book, he wanted to include some CAD drawings from 20 years ago, but the files came up as corrupted, so he asked you a while ago to help him be able to view the files, but you ended up forgetting about it? Oh, okay. Well, that is certainly one reason to go back. Alrighty. Let's see what we have.
ここの温泉は世界で有名です。
A word that indicates that's useful or simply used as an expression to show surprise. So surprised.
その地震は本当に大きかった。
あなたは科学が好きですか？
Or test score. Oh,
テストの点数が下がる。
娘、角にはホコリがよくたまるでしょう。母、そうよ。
僕は紫が大好きです。
今朝は大雨だったので電車が遅れた。
Oh no.
おじいちゃんがおばあちゃんに、ばあさん、一緒に散歩に行きませんか？
From time to time.
医師、時々運動をした方がいいですよ。
Not that strong. Yeah. Money disappeared from my wallet. Is BattleNet down for me? I don't know. I don't keep logging in. I can click on it, see what happens. No. It's not. Disappear. You know the character, but the ending is kind of weak. It's the ending to the verb that is throwing me off, right? Or is it stop? Hmm. What would you disagree from this short?
I think
I mean, uh, it's an argument for its argument's sake. It's a cyclic argument. He has to use a belief system to argue against a belief system. But I have no problems with the idea that it's belief system. You can't fully understand something within the system that you're participating in. But it's very similar to him. He makes the same argument on a belief system to argue against another belief system. So whether it permanently destroys something, he can't make an argument for that because he's making an argument within the argument. Like, what I mean is, in order for his thing to be correct, he would have to be outside the system. But since we're all observers in the participation of our own understanding, you can't ever prove nor disprove it. So yes, in a way, you could say, colloquially, he can permanently disprove something, and if it's true, then it means that it is understandable, which disproves his argument. So it's kind of like, right, if you need a belief system in order to make something understandable, it requires that same belief system to make the thing there he's talking about understandable, which makes it a belief system. So at which point do you disagree with his axiom? There's no disagreement. He simply did not show anything. He stated what there is truth. There are things as truth. Truth is understandable, and the understanding is good. There is such thing as good. Well, there isn't. There is and there isn't. Right? Because you have to believe in it. So you still require the belief system, which makes it, which he's arguing is not or is understandable. In order to do that, you need a belief system to make it that way. Like, his argument is predicated on a belief system. So his belief is that science is a belief system. So in a way, that makes it permanently, I don't know, however he was vindicating it, right? However it's vindicating it, but he's using the same act, the same thing to vindicate it. It's not based on evidence. In order for things to be understandable, you have to understand the nature of his belief in order to contradict and refute the belief, the understanding. So to me, it's true and not true at the same time because there's no proof denying it or proving it. And that's the whole point. So if you want to define science as a way of trying to understand truth, the first axiom is only an intelligible statement given a set of belief systems. Yes. Like, in order for him to say those things, the things he knows have to be understandable, which is not true, right? So, like, what I mean is, he believes he can permanently refute the axioms because they're predicated on beliefs, and beliefs are not necessarily the same as understanding, right? Because the whole act of science is that it requires understanding, but he believes that. So it's not evidence, which would require science to make him irrefutably, permanently dismantle the belief of science. So it would require evidence and proof and science to do so. Or he could suggest that belief is the system of understanding. So in either way, it's taking one belief system to disprove another belief system. I'm not disagreeing with him, because you can't fully understand the thing you're participating in. You know what I mean? Like, if you are a participant, at least that's what I think. That's personally my opinion. If you are a participant in a system that you are trying to understand, you cannot fully comprehend it, right? However, what he's trying to dismantle is that it's fallacious to want to do that or to understand something. Well, no one said anything about 100% understanding. It's always a proportion of 100%. Because the thing you're trying to do is you're trying to observe 100% of the system you participate in. So I totally agree with him. His argument, he's trying to make an argument though, that it is a proof, a permanent proof, that doesn't make sense, right? It's not true, like, or whatever. And that he's making an argument based on proof and logic with his belief system. So it's the same. He has a cyclic argument, in my opinion. His argument also refutes his arguments for proving something, because his argument is based on logic, right? And logic is what the science is. Like, science is predicated on logic. So I think it's a little bit like, yeah, we all, humans live and die. Go, okay, well, if you don't believe in death and you believe in an afterlife, then okay, so you need the prior assumption of understanding to even state that truth exists? Yeah. Given what you said, how do you get anywhere understanding the idea of truth? The idea of truth is, I mean, like, that's what he was talking about, right? What is truth and what is not? Well, if you're given what I've said, then I accept that there are things we believe in, and then things that we see and observe. That's it. Right? The idea is, I don't disagree with him that the things we don't know, it operates on a belief system. And then the things we do know are observational and logical. So the truth, in order for me to agree with him and disagree with him at the same time, is both. That's the idea of believing in things when you don't know, and believing in things that you do know. And this is the truth. The truth is that there are things you don't know, and then there are things you do know, of which all of them requires a sense of belief. That belief is truth. Alright, so I have no qualms with agreeing with him and disagreeing with him at the same time. He was trying to make an argument that there is a right and a wrong. And it was phrased in a way that he was like trying to phrase himself as an antagonist towards another belief system. But belief is involved in integrating both things you know and things you don't know. So what we don't know is what we strive to know. They're not separate things. But doesn't knowing something assume there is truth, so you can't begin to tackle truth with that argument? But doesn't knowing something assume there is truth? No, it doesn't. Doesn't believing you know something is truth. Like, you believe you know something. That is true. You kind of just cut out one of the major reasons for his argument. But the thing is, what you're trying to do is you're trying to separate, in my opinion, how would you define belief? Believing knowing something is true. And then you're going to ask me, so then what is knowing? Knowing is being able to believe that something is true. I'm not, I'm making, you're trying to ask me, so how would I rectify this situation? And my hand wavy suggestion is that they're both related. So you know things, and therefore you believe it's true. If you believe you know something, then it can be true. These are, they're together. Oftentimes, what the argument you're kind of making is you believe belief is not the same as knowing. Because what you want to know is truth, and not necessarily true. Or in other words, not true. How is it logically sound to define belief as believing something is true? You've used the word in definition. I didn't. I said belief is knowing something is true. Please stop changing my words. And then I said knowing is believing something is true. So don't misconstrue me. When you quoted me, believing something is true, belief is not believing something is true. Belief is knowing something is true. I'm using your words. You said know and belief. These two things are two separate things that are related to each other. Whether they are the same or not, you can use your imagination. But I did not say believing something is true is the definition of belief. I said knowing something is true is belief. When you believe something, you know it to be true. That's how I would make an exception to that. But if you believe that, so you're being cynical, in my opinion, by inferring that you cannot define belief because it cannot be true. That's what you're trying to refer. I think that's what you're implying. Belief cannot be true, or it has a chance. as a chance, like a belief, can be true and untrue. And then knowing is always true. Well, that's the argument that you're trying to make, because if science acts on a belief system, like there's a part of science that has a belief system, then it can't possibly know things, like know everything, right? Because to know something, it's always true, because you equivocate knowing as true, and then belief as something that can be true or untrue. And that's a fair argument. I'm not making an argument that science knows something that's always true. It's what at least I feel he is trying to insist. Science requires belief in order to know that's always true. The very fundamental is the belief is that science can know everything in order to make things always true. And I already said to me that when you're a participant in a system, both science can know things and not know things. So they can, effectively, there are true things and potential of untrue things, because it will consistently be incomplete. So how do I know that? And so what's the difference between belief and know? They're related to each other. If you have a belief system, quote unquote, or a system trying to know things, you believe that you are able to know everything. But since I participate in the idea that if you're in a system, you can know certain things that may be always true, and then you have to believe that there are things that you can't know or do know as true. Now, in order for science to rectify this situation, there is a combination of believing and observing that makes things always true, which is what you're prescribing to. For myself, I don't quite think of science in that way. I believe science believes they can try to know most things, right? Most things. But they also accept the idea that you probably can't know everything. So therefore, it requires a belief system to believe that. It would take someone outside of the system to know everything about the system that's being observed. So in this way, I agree with him and don't agree with him at the same time, because he didn't suggest both. He suggests that science, and much like other science, is different. They believe, or they don't believe, they know that they can explain all things, right, through observation and stuff. And I like, that's not true in my opinion. Science believe that they can try to know everything, but they can't know everything in the system that they're participating in. So they must act in a belief system that it can be achieved. And that, how is that any different from the belief of this statement? It really isn't. I don't really disagree with him or agree with him. He believes that it's not possible to know everything. So therefore, it requires belief to refute that science believes in that. And that's kind of like the idea. You're a participant in the system that you participate in. So if I had to glean something, I guess the idea is the thing you're trying to imply is that you wish you knew things as truths, as opposed to understanding that there are going to be truths and non-truths, right? Or maybe like partial truths. The idea is zeros and ones, right? Zeros and ones. There are going to be things that are untrue, and there are things that are going to be true. And it would be wonderful if it's possible that we would know these things as zeros and ones. And I maybe in a way never accepted this premise in the first place. I don't think I've ever accepted this premise where there is something that is zeros and ones. I believe, right? I believe that science tries to ascertain what is considered true at the moment, which requires a belief that the current truth stays true at the based on the evidence. So what I mean is that what is true now, for example, like the understanding of gravity, whether it is true in a state of permanence, because that's what I feel you're most comfortable with. You want it to be true, as in it's 100% of the time. But rarely have I ever said that, for me personally, that science would say comfortably that anything is 100% certain. It's certain to a degree. It could be certain to a degree that makes you believe it is true at all times. So that's kind of how I interpret science most of the time. So I kind of agree with him. Does it permanently invalidates like science is whatever he was trying to dismantle? It's obviously a YouTube short, so it's cut out of context of what the overall motivations are behind it. I don't think that changed my scope of science, nor do that change the scope of religion. So a lot of times the argument, I'm gonna assume the argument is the idea of secular thought and religion, right? Religion and secular. It was never said that secular and religion has separation of belief and truth. Or in this case, the word that you're focusing on is the word know. So the difference between belief and know is that belief can be untrue. And truth is always with knowing. So if you know something to be true, then is it true? I don't think there's anything where a participant in a system that they're trying to observe is ever this. So instead of going into his axiomatically, just like, I don't agree with his, like, maybe that's the disagreement. I don't agree with his axiom, his assumption, or his belief that that's what science is construed as, and that's fair. Like, I don't represent the scientific community. For myself, this word science means that we are trying to ascertain what is true at the moment, right? Knowing that we believe it's incomplete at all times, in my opinion. If there's any absolute, is the idea that there is a relative certainty that something is true, not the absolute certainty that it is true. And that's why I had no problems. Like, I don't think that's a new thing to me. Like, I don't think what he said shattered my reality of science. I think I had always believed that to be the case. So whenever like people talk about the true appreciation of science, right? One of the true, let's just say the true appreciation, which by the way, appreciation involves, it requires a belief system. In order to appreciate the truth, you believe it's true. Like, I don't, like, if you think that absolute truth comes before belief, I'm not entirely sure if I make that argument. I don't know how I would make this argument. Not largely because the human response would be that in order for something to be true, it would also mean that you believe it's true. Like these things are these things are intertwined with each other. So trying to separate them, in my opinion, is maybe that's what the short, you're trying to interpret the short as trying to suggest. And I don't think he does. And I don't think I do either. I don't disagree with him. Belief and truths, knowing and believing are so connected with each other, right? Obviously, maybe you could say something like, if you were an observer of someone else's reality, right? Like say you're outside, you're like subhuman, and you don't occupy a system, you occupy an outside system, and then you're investigating the reality. This is where science comes in, by the way. So in order for science to get closer to truths, in my opinion, truths is that they observe realities that are not their realities. So like you have for example, you have a model organism, right? And this model organism has a controlled space. But this controlled space is the human operates outside of this controlled space. So they can observe the totality, or arguably that's what the argument is. They can observe the totality of this model organism's 100%, but really it's more like as close to 100% as possible. So then everything has predictability within this modeled system. That's used a lot differently currently online. Yeah, I know. Forget it. But you know what I mean, right? Like the science is they understand a system and they try to get as close to 100% as possible. But they are observing a system where they themselves do not participate in. So you're hoping that when you look at a part of the system, you can understand everything about it. And how do you understand everything about it? You can change it, right? And it has a predictable outcome. So that's kind of where science is. Now, is it logical to think that you need this to know something, right? Then by the logic of this, it's imperative to understand that it would be illogical to assume that humans can understand the system around them entirely. They can try their best, but this would execute, so it would contradict the necessity to know something. You have to be outside of a system. So what is the closest thing to that is humans observing other humans, and you're hoping that system is outside of each other. So you're hoping that you're in a system that is outside of the system you're observing. And that is the closest thing, in my opinion. This is human experimentation. Or another one would be clinical trials. That's the closest thing. But the thing about clinical trials is that not all the variables are controlled, right? You can't control a person's life after they enter the clinical trials, right? So like some things are uncontrolled. They just simply are uncontrolled. And what do? You use in my opinion, a belief system in order to say, well, the things not controlled are not statistically significant. This is where confounding factors are ruled out. For example, like a twin study. When you do a twin study, you're hoping that the twins are in this system, and then all the things that are uncontrollable, they're not statistically significant because they're believed to be the same. That's kind of how I feel about the closest thing you can get to like understanding the system that you participate in. So you're hoping that outside of human experimentation, which is a big no-no, right? Like putting humans in a bubble, and then the thing is, remember that the controlled system is only a part of the larger system, right? So that means like even if you put humans in a bubble and experiment on them, for example, theoretically, right? As much respect to past events as possible, like psychology and whatnot. If you put them in, you have to remember that you still only know a part of the system, right? Because the controlled system that you have is based on your existing knowledge. And that's incomplete until you try to put them all together. So at some point, it gets closer and closer to completion. The idea is that is where some people believe science can get to, where you take like physics, for example. We talked about physics quite a lot, and then we can weave in all of the other sciences. With enough knowledge, you're hoping that you can piece together the entire system, and then when you reproduce the system, you put it back together, right? Put it all back together, it would get closer and closer to the truth. And that's kind of how I interpret science. So like the idea is, the belief is that you can collect parts of the knowledge. They can test various parts, and then you can reassemble all of them in a controlled, isolated system. So a closed system, which is a word that people use, closed and open system. An open system is, you are in it. You are in the system you are observing, right? So in order for science, in my opinion, to know something, the ideal case is to be in a controlled, closed system, of which is based on all the parts of the knowledge, because when you observe controlled, closed systems, you get parts of the knowledge. So when you collect all the knowledge, you can reassemble it in a closed system and hope that it is 100% true, or approximately 100% true. Is it truly a closed system given the nature of trying to use science to understand? I don't actually think so. I don't think it can ever be closed. It would require something else, right? It would require being not a participant, but it can get close to. That's the idea. When you keep saying the word truly, that's where you and I will never meet. If you consistently keep thinking that truth is zeros and ones, it's not zeros and ones. There are truths and there are beliefs. There are parts that can be confirmed to be true, and there are parts that can't. When you're constantly saying truly, you're saying overall. like at all times, which I can't agree with, or like I'm not the person to be talking to, because overall you can never be 100% certain. And I don't think, as a scientist, or like, I'm not a scientist anymore, right? But I guess I exercise scientific thought. I don't think this was ever true to begin with. Like, the whole truly thing, I don't believe in 100%. That might make people uncomfortable. I mean, I think there are people who there's a lot of pride in saying that this is achievable, right? Which is a belief system, by the way. When you think something is achievable, it's a belief until it actually happens, right? So like maybe you can say certain truths, right? There are certain truths that people believe are true, or maybe they know it's true. So here are things that people know are true. Death, right? And the whole idea of death is how you segregate a religion from science. That's one of the hottest topics about science and religion. One of the separations is death. Death is finality. It is something that is considered as a 100% truth. Death. And then that's how you segregate religion from science. Like, I honestly, either way, I don't know what evidence is to know that death is final. Like, you've asked me this couple of questions. It ties back to your insinuations or your implications whenever you ask me, like, do you believe death is final? And then you talked about the thing where, like, if someone didn't die, like, they recover from like a non-living state, then it's not considered final. And like, well, final is not final. I don't know how final is, because it requires a belief system in order to know what is final. Like, if you are not aware of your own existence anymore, is that the final truth? Well, you could argue in a scientific way, it would be true at all times, because the person is no longer aware they are alive, right? They have the incapacity to know they are alive anymore, which is what's considered as death. Sure. And then I made the belief argument, I guess you could call it the religious argument, that there is metaphysics, right? A metaphysics argument where it's like, well, is it death if there is legacy, right? Like someone's book, or I don't know, someone's memories, etc. I don't know. I operate in both, despite not practicing. I think these type of categorizations require that you view it as zeros and ones. Right. Zeros and ones. In fact, I feel like that short that you were using, it tries to categorize them. And I'm okay with that. I think it provides clarity for people who want clarity, right? I want to make this clear as a disclaimer, so that people don't assume or presume what I believe. My answer oftentimes is both, or all of the above. And ironically, or maybe contradictorily, it's largely because I believe truths are tantamount, or like, maybe like, is also similar to belief, where they go hand in hand. So the disclaimer is that you can believe what someone else believes and accept what they believe, while at the same time refute them, because the belief is that truths are negotiable. If truths weren't negotiable and you believe there are universal truths, then those truths would be held and be 100%. There are very few things in human history that is 100% other than things that have come to pass. So if you want catharsis, like catharsis in truths, past is true. And that's kind of the thing that science relies on. It relies on past. Come to pass, I think it's the phrase, come to pass. Yeah, sure. That's semantics, but right. The truth is the past. So anything that's happened in the past, and you might be thinking like, well, what if time isn't linear and it's a loop? Like, well, then we're just screwed with truths, aren't we? And that's like, and you're thinking like, wait, people think time is a loop as opposed to a linear line? It's like, well, yeah, it could be possible. The idea is that there are, truths are as certain as they can be, not because we operate in time. So how do you know that time isn't a loop? You don't. So there are still arguments. Like, one truth is time is linear. This is one truth that you have to operate in because of science. It's like, how do you operate outside of time? I don't know. Is it truly a system? Yeah. Is it truly a closed system given the value? You've been clipping to go back over this comment. You have had some massive misunderstanding, but I think I understand now. That's fair. Like, I don't think they're separate things. Largely because I'm not sure if it's achievable. So I want to believe it's achievable. Here's one thing. Maybe this is what I feel would be a human condition. The human condition is that it requires humans to believe things in order for things to be true. One of the human conditions, like you stepped into one of my human conditions that I believe, because I believe things and therefore they're true, or things are true in order to allow me to believe them. Like they're not separated. Would you agree that even though the past is an objective truth, it's inapplicable when trying to use that due to memories or even perceptional results of the past is from true? And I'm not saying this is a critique as what you say. No, it's not. I already made the argument that I don't know if time is loop, and I didn't say that was my opinion. My opinions are always when I say it's my opinion. This can still be true. I didn't say the past is objective truth. I believe people think one of the major objective truths is that death is final and time is linear. Those are things that you would believe. You are the person I'm referring to, along with other people. Yeah. So, like, I don't know. I have not separated from the opinion that there are things that I believe in, and there are things that are held true by me and other people. So, yes, I could appreciate that maybe time is not linear, and I can appreciate that time is linear. It is with belief that I can appreciate these things. Is your opinion that the past is the closest to truth we can get? Probably, maybe, honestly. That's an interesting thing. Like, since, like, when it comes to truth, right, you get closest to 99%, right? So if you're making it a competition, right, you're asking someone who operates on a number line to determine if they can understand the 0.01%, the outliers, and the answer is I don't know. Like, if you want a real answer, like an honest answer, I don't know. However, if you want an answer based on observing people in the past, which again, it operates in time, if we assume time is linear, then it would require that you assume time is linear in order to accept the premise that the past is the closest thing to absolute truth. Right? It's constantly sounding like it's a cyclic argument. Largely because, to me, the truth is I don't know. It requires to understand the system you exist in order to understand a property of it. It's kind of like understanding the origins of something, which is something you ask a lot. The origins of things. How do you know what's the beginning, right? Like, how you know what's the beginning? 0 and 1s. Can't know. Can't know without a belief system. Since you are in the system, since the system includes all of this, you can't know. So the closest answer is that I don't know. So whenever you're talking about like, oh, what do you think is the beginning of the universe? Like, how do you know the beginning of the universe? It's like, well, we could extrapolate all these things. You can make an argument because here's the past, right? Here's the extreme case. This is what I mean by forcing a projection, right? If I made the argument that the past is the closest thing to the truth, when pushed to the extreme, how do you know the origin of things? If you're wondering like, oh, the origin of things, you're talking about the universe, aren't you? No, I'm also talking about the egg or the chicken. You can make an argument. So you can make an argument that you can use the past to know the absolute truth. The one thing you're assuming is that the chicken or the egg question is that it is in a closed system of which you can prove that something came first. So in order to make an argument that the egg came before the chicken, right? The egg comes before the chicken. You can start with an egg and then it develops into a chicken in a system that you designed, and therefore that proves that the egg came before the chicken. Right? Now, does it prove it when you include the system yourself in the system? Now, when you're in the system that you're observing, that's an open system to you, like to the person who's observing. So now it's no longer a closed system, it's an open system. That means you can't know. Like, you can't know. whether the chicken or the egg came first. Unless like you saw it come about. If you saw it come about, then it would be this system. It would be a closed system you're looking at. Like for example, a new species, like you made a new species, like you constructed a new egg, the existence of a new species. Then you know in this closed system, you know how it started. Like you, the person who made the system, knows everything that's in the system. So say you take an egg and you categorically change it into your species, like the species you have created, then you know everything of its existence. It's coming into existence. So then you are observing a closed system. It's a closed system you made, right? But the moment you include yourself in it, then it's an open system, and you can't answer zeros and ones, in my opinion. I think it's illogical to think that you can answer zeros and ones. Yeah, like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Yes, it would be a good simile of this. If you can't observe yourself in something and know like it's either like the totality of the information is not observable. But you can if it's in a closed system of which you can observe everything. But I would say Heisenberg uncertainty principle is a good analogy, right? I'm not sure if it's one-to-one because I don't know enough about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle other than it's like defining definition. And so even pushing you to state absolutes when you clearly state that it's not what you believe. Yeah, I don't believe in absolute. You sometimes get caught up on a sentence or a partial argument you bring up. Yeah, most of it is like, for example, science produce truths of closed systems. They also produce partial truths of open systems. But those open systems, the reason why it's a partial truth is because when you're in an open system, it's partially true, right? Regardless of, as you go towards the extremes, you don't know those things. Now, one of the truest things that happen in scientific thought is if you can analyze enough closed systems, like say, here's the number line, right? And you're trying to analyze a phenomenon, 0 or 1s, right? 0 or 1 phenomenon. You can learn something in one closed system, learn another, and what you're hoping for is as you're gaining enough overlaps, you can reassemble the closed system and have a good estimate of the open system, the totality of the open system. So theoretically, or like scientifically in a way, if you can make an argument, when you understand something that overlaps with something else, like this, you hope that you can assemble the whole thing again, right? And that's kind of how this is my opinion. That's kind of how I imagine science. This is the principle of constructing truths in science, where you take closed systems, you analyze parts of the closed systems, then you reassembled it into a larger system, and you hope that it mirrors the larger system. And this is where we talked about physics and chemistry and biology. Emergence. Emergence is a human condition. The whole idea of thinking that you can have multiple closed systems, evaluate all of them, and then assemble them back up. Like for example, you can take any form of division, physics into chemistry, for example. Or then you can flip it around and say chemistry into biology, emergence is one of the antagonistic human conditions to an open system. Yeah. So the answer came down, like, for me to comfortably say, is it's a combination of belief and truth, largely because emergence answers the question about open systems. Like, how can we not observe everything if we're inside the system we're participating in? Because of emergence. How can you account for what happens when you observe all these closed systems and you put them back together and you're like, what the heck? Why did it just suddenly become unpredictable? Right? Or it becomes spurious. And humans are the last frontier, right? When it comes to biology. So whenever you have like E. coli, Cerevisiae, and like the Drosophila, right? All the model organisms, and you study them and you try to translate them into a larger system, it becomes, I don't know, things happen. But there is a relative, right? A relative predictability. So you can 90%, 80%, 40%, that you can relatively gauge its likelihood. And that gives you a relative completion of the open system. It's always a partial truth of the system that you participate in, or in this case, what I'm referring to as an open system. Closed system, you can get very close to 100%, if not acceptably 100%, because the idea is you understand everything that exists in it. And even then, it's a very difficult argument to make when you're unable to replicate it. But the idea is one day maybe it can. Like, for example, AI, right? AI, you would agree, would be one of the, if you wanted a closed system in which it represents like maybe some form of parallel subhuman, right? Subhuman categorization, you would think that then if humans created a machine learning algorithm, that it would have a closed system with predictable outputs. And we come back to what you're studying right now. The thing you're studying, your field of study is this. And yet it still creates spurious outputs. Like, what's happening? What happened? Despite AI having a closed system, right, through coding and scripting, there was a part of the open system, right? What's the part of the open system? The human data. The totality of human behavior is part of an open system that you infuse into a closed system, and now it's weird. Because we're part of the system now. Immediately, the reason why humans, despite constructing AI, we are part of an open system. So inherently, despite AI being a closed system, humans are imparting an openness into it. So all the things that are spurious is coming from the open system that we exist in. Like, we don't understand everything that prompts human behavior. So when you create something, it inherits some of that openness. And much like you were making an agreement, so then how do we do science? If humans do science, you could make the same logical argument that since humans are doing science, then the stuff they are doing are inherently open. Yes, that is why I still believe that most things, despite it's coming through a human lens, it's part of the human condition. Humans conduct science. So we go back to the original short, which is imparting that I don't think, in my opinion, he was making an argument that people state. Like, what I mean is, he made an argument for a statement that he could refute, in my opinion. But I don't think that statement existed for me, personally. He's refuting something that is a moot point, because I don't see the difference between the statement he's making about refuting, because I believe it refutes his statement too. The whole idea of arguing against a system of truths is that I don't think those systems exist, being the very thing that allows him to refute that in the first place. So like, it sounds, so this is my, maybe I'm gonna be as respectful as I can. It sounds like someone trying to sound profound, but it's not profound to me. You know, like, for example, what is that statement? You know how you can appear clever by making a problem and then solving it yourself, right? I could sound intelligent if I created a problem and therefore I can solve that problem. If I created my own problem in order to refute the problem, to sound like I'm saying something, that's what I mean by a cyclic argument. So whenever someone tells me, like, you know, hey, so this is a common critique of Jordan Peterson's arguments. Yeah, so oftentimes, and I'm not saying it's bad or good, sometimes this stuff can keep someone like constantly thinking, right? I do this myself. You know, humans create cyclic arguments to challenge themselves a lot of times, right? You have to be cyclic in order to challenge your own beliefs and whatnot. So I'm not saying cyclic arguments is inherently bad. The thing is, for myself, when I'm looking at that clip, I'm like, I don't understand what he's refuting. Because from my perspective, it would be illogical to think that way about science. It's so difficult for me to separate belief and truths when talking about science, because what does 99% mean? It's a combination of belief and truths. You verify the outcome because it's in the past. You've done and performed something and you observed it, right? However, it doesn't say that it is true. It say that you believe based on past instances, or like what is true, and then you believe the rest to be true because it's close enough. Like, the whole idea of this number is saying, no, you know this. That doesn't mean it's true 100% of the time. So his argument was that science is believing that it's always true, like it can achieve truthfulness, and I'm not entirely sure if there's an argument there. So it sounds cool, it sounds neat. I'm not entirely sure if that changes my perspective on life or university. I don't think it changed anything, honestly. It's a moot argument for me personally. I don't represent the scientific community again. I think that AI is just one step detached from the same problem humans have, leading to an open system. Exactly. Yep. Does using parts of the system the more accurately you measure X momentum, the less accurately you can measure its position, vice versa. Oh, that's for the Heisenberg uncertainty. Yeah. Does using the part of the system to try and accurately assemble the whole system always fail due to emergent properties? You're addressing the emergent. I have no idea. It would be really wonderful. Like, hear me out. It would be really wonderful to talk to an expert, maybe in a very, very specific field, right, Prokal? It would be really wonderful to find an expert who only investigates a very closed system, like super specialized closed system. We're talking about maybe like measuring the mass of, I don't know, water, and then ask them, right? It asks them if through the measurement of all this mass, they could ascertain the emergent properties that are to happen. Like I don't know how this is gonna work, but it would be a privilege to talk to someone who has this experience where they measured so many things of a phenomenon that is bigger than it. Say like they measured hydrogen atoms and oxygen atoms so much that, or like however, like observed it so much that they are able to reassemble the emergent properties of water or some crazy thing like that. I don't know. I've often rarely ever thought that, okay, I understand that, for example, we were talking about viruses the other time. I understand that I could analyze this part in a specific state, but that means that whatever I analyze is not the state that it is naturally in. The closest thing I can ever get is to try to continuously get closer to that natural state, whatever that state is. But regardless, it's gonna constantly be incomplete. So rarely have I ever done research in which I'm like, oh, okay, I'm basically mirroring the, what is it? Physiological is the word that people would use, or scientists would use, like a physiological state. Your model organism is placed in a physiological state, and that everything, but the thing you put in is not physiological. Like you're testing that. So it's crazy for me to think, like I keep having a cyclic argument, like, okay, well, I engineered this thing and I placed it in a physiological state, so therefore does it reflect the same thing that would happen? And I'm like, I haven't really done that before. Most of the time science, at least the science that I do, there's a delta. You are changing something, and you're placing everything else in the same thing in order to see a difference. The physiological state is the control, the thing that you're observing, right? And you're hoping the thing that you're observing is in a controlled environment, in a controlled, closed environment, right? They're kind of synonymous with each other when you're thinking about the environment. In a closed system, you're hoping you're observing a closed system, but you're not. Or I haven't ever participated in a laboratory experiment in which it's in a closed system. There are so many things that I don't know about the system. Like, okay, this is what happens. And I'm like, okay, but I can't even characterize whatever is physiological. There's too many unknowns. So what you do is you try to cancel them out by using control experiments, right? That's what the control is. The control is being used as a negative, right? And that's kind of the problem here. And then let's read the rest. I think that AI is just one step. Yeah, we did that. How do you invent or create a closed system if the system is created from an inherently open system? I don't know. I can't. This is the problem here. And I guess I inadvertently answered that question. I don't know. Like, it's an inevitable problem for me. Like, maybe I'm too stupid for this, or like I'm inexperienced, or I have a belief system that's contrary to this. But every time I go and say, okay, I have a controlled experiment, this would constitute as the negation. This is the control is often close to the null. It's the null hypothesis, right? What happens in the null is used to understand a delta you made. So in order to not try to make a closed system. So I didn't use a closed system. In biology, you don't use closed systems. You use a control to theoretically create and remove the part that you have to close off. So the idea is you create a delta and you make it relative to the control. The control is to remove the open variables, right? So like if you ran at a pace of 1 mile per hour and then tomorrow you run at a pace of 2 miles per hour, relatively speaking, you're assuming everything that's open is the same. And that's why in science, in my opinion, a controlled experiment is absolutely necessary, because you don't understand the rest of the open system. And even then, when you're trying to control all the open variables, it will make your results come up with 99% as far as down to like negative things. So whenever someone says, I understand data, right? My data says if I do A, B happens. Therefore, it's proof. That's absolutely bonkers. Like, what? What does that mean? Like, what's your control? Because if you don't have any control, whatever this is, it doesn't mean anything to me. Like, the validity of doing something and confirming that it happens is asinine. It's absolutely asinine without control. That's kind of like saying like, oh, you're not going to pre-select, or like you decide to pre-select everything, right? Like, hey, data shows that eating meat, which by the way is still a contentious thing. Eating meat, especially red meat, reduces longevity, right? Says who? Says what? Says what are your controls? Because the last time I checked, the moment you control for pre-selection, you realize that this correlation is weakened. Like, there are people who live very long eating meat. Statistically, even if you do even if you try to pre-select against it, that's what happens with control statements, right? Like, when someone asks, oh, I heard this was unhealthy. Okay, what are your control environments? Right? What are your conditions? Because without understanding what the conditions are and what your relatives are, you have no control over what is open in your analyses. Like, even the data, the collection, when you do meta-analyses, right? When you know, those like summary articles where you take all the articles and then you try to create a meta-analysis of all the data, right? Like, there are hundreds of experiments on the effect of creatine, which is something that we talked about briefly on creatine. When you do a meta-analysis, you have to control statistically for the controls, as in you have to rule out that all the all the data, the things you can't control, which are the open parts, basically the conditions, you have to argue that they are negligible, as in they don't statistically take away from your meta-analyses. So for example, one experiment only used women. The other experiment only used trained subjects. The other experiment uses trained subjects and untrained subjects as two cohorts. One experiment is operated in Japan. One experiment is operated in the United States. All those things are part of the open system, because when you're doing a meta-analysis, you have no control over that part. So every single time someone tells me like, oh, my method is better, right? My method is better, or this is the best method. It's like, what's your control? That's one of the fundamental pillars of science. In order to science, in my opinion, is ever concerned about the open system, how open their system is, because you have the control for all of those things. So whenever someone says, oh yeah, experiments are easy, you basically test a variable. It's like, that's not the hard part. That is the easy part. To me, the easiest part of an experiment is the part that people think is the hardest. It's not. The hardest part is to control for everything you don't know. And that sucks. It ruined, we talk about science, about producing results, but people don't highlight that this is the running joke, by the way, 95% of the time it's a failure because of controls, because of open. Only 5% of the actual data, and I'm going to argue even less, is what you see. What you see is published. When someone says, oh yeah, eating red meat is unhealthy, less than 5% of the results, because the other 95% is pathetic controls or just inability to know, and it sucks. That's why science is unrewarding in its most right. It's also thankless, which is something that Valentine equated to like his job, but it is also thankless because you don't see it. You don't ever see how much the very nature of our first comment today was. There is belief that the control is sufficient. You understand enough about the system so that you can cancel it out. You can say, well, it's relatively the same. And yet, since humans create duplicates, right? A lot of times, a lot of people say, oh, you have to duplicate the results. You have to reproduce the results. That alone, some people would say, oh, that's a hard task to do. It's like, yeah, now that is really hard. It's actually much harder than doing one experiment, testing one variable. Now imagine what I just said about control. Now this is where it sucks even more. Why do we duplicate and reproduce the data over and over again? Because a lot of times the control environments, the factors that we control for, they don't stay the same. What's one of the most fundamental things about duplication and reproduction? Repetition. So whenever you have like a person conduct one experiment and then on a different day they conduct another experiment, the control environment is relatively the same. They're trying to make it the same, but you can't possibly try to do everything simultaneously at the same time. You are getting closer and closer to controlling the environment. But to observe and stuff, time is a thing, right? You being human is a thing. You operate on the system. So yeah, science is incredibly inherently subject to saying, well, it's close enough. It is the closest thing we can get, right? And that's kind of what I mean. And I think this is incredibly underappreciated. And the inundation of the internet's data undermines what it is to know that something is true versus something that you believe is true. And honestly, there are so many truths now online that whenever someone jokes about, oh, you know, the world of fake news is here, or we're in the post fake news world where there are, if you believe it to be true, it becomes true. And I'm like, yeah, that's a funny meme, but at the same time, it's baked into the things that people believe are true, science. I'm like, I don't think this was like science is against this. Like personally, I don't think the principles of science is against this, which is believe is true. When you say something is 99% true, that is what you believe is true, because there's no 100%. There's rarely ever 100%. In fact, one could only hope. Hope is another form of belief. Only hope that what you observe 95% of the time even holds up to 95% of the time. Like, and it's 95, and in order to create confidence, the more control you have, the more confident your data that you said 95% of the time is reliable. And this is like why science is, in my opinion, incredibly underappreciated. It's ironic that we're having this discussion, because the very nature of why science is underappreciated is due to, in my opinion, the misinterpretation. And that's why I feel like that short might have been taken out of context, because the very nature of science, what makes it difficult is the existence of that argument that he made. I don't think science would be that scrutinizing and that rigorous if they truly believe what he was arguing against, which I don't think it's true. It's a moot point. I do not believe scientists at any time, like those who are rigorous, who constantly control for environments and do null hypothesis testing, I don't think the best of science believes the argument he is arguing against. So like there's no reason to have that argument. It's not profound, in my opinion. With all due respect to him, right? I think it's interesting. It's a good thought experiment to think that, yeah, ideally you can refute idealism very easily, right? If something is ideal, if you paint your opponent as an idealist, it is often easy to sound smart, in my opinion. And that's creating an easy target. And personally, you know, as an ad, I know that Procol mentioned that he had to go in a couple of minutes, so he'll just watch back. It is like I've said this time and time again. When someone presents an argument to me, right, like as an idealistic statement, they use an idealistic statement and they argue against me, it is not, to me personally, is not to me impressive for me to counter argue it. Because if you have an idealist, like someone who's presenting an ideal case or arguing for an ideal case, you can easily refute it to quote sound smart. And in this case, I don't want to like put Procol on the spot, but when someone tries to like get me to say 0 or 1, right? 0 or 1, it's fairly easy to break apart, because this is idealistic. If you saying it's true or false, so it breaks down, because open system. Yes and no. And not that it's not worth it. This is valuable. Being able to idolize things create clarity, and so I'm not saying these are bad things. They are also not impressive, right? So that's where we are right now. where I believe that I believe that so a lot of these things, when you have interviews and stuff, it kind of rubs me the wrong way. Like, me personally, I can't really appreciate it, where when someone paints their opponent, the thing that they're trying to tackle, as an idealistic argument, and then they break it down and say, ha, see, I can break down an idealistic statement. And I'm like, yeah, most people can, because it's idealistic. When you think of things like idealistically, it's easy to break down. All you have to do is present a case that it is not 0 and 1. These are two things. These are two states. So when you say, like, oh, tell me something that is false, tell me something that is true, and then I will refute it. It's like, well, you all you need is, like, the thing you need, the likelihood, it's not universal, but the likelihood is you can come up with an infinite number of permutations between 0 and 1 that would make it not 0 and not 1. There's an infinite number of points between 0 and 1. And this is to make it a little bit more clarity, because clarity is something that the internet loves, 0 and 1s, right? If you have 0 and 1s, to me, this is the state that I'm constantly in when I'm talking to people. And it's good. So from a behavioral standpoint, having 0s and 1s provide clarity. So in a time when you spend a lot of time without clarity, 0s and 1s really help with, you know, emotional truths and whatnot. And then when you're healthy, oftentimes it's like, you know, 0.00001 to 0.99999 and everything in between. And that's kind of where it's humorous, because this is not science. Like, to me, I'm so baffled by what he's trying to argue, and it makes me want to watch the whole video or the interview, because this is science. However, so what happened here? If this is not science, what is it? This is lay science. Or in other words, this is popular opinion. This is net speak, in my opinion, right? And it's healthy. It's healthy because when you're online and you're looking for answers and you're trying to find clarity in things, you want something like this. It's part of the human condition. You want clarity when you're asking questions and wanting answers. But inherently, when it comes to professionalism, like things that are operating in science, it's this. And it doesn't have to be science, by the way. It's anything you specialize in. This is part of the human condition. If you're a specialist, you're operating in here. If you're a generalist, like you're outside of the discipline you're looking at, then it's this. And that's what I'm doing this very moment. I'm using syllogistic logic, right? I used the, or maybe I talked about the human condition, for example. I'm not a philosopher. So the moment a philosopher comes at me, they're going to accuse me, which I would accept, because they're going to accuse me for sounding like 0s and 1s. And then they would argue that it's more like this. And I agree with you. That is the human condition, right? I speak like 0s and 1s about things that I don't have nuance over. And then that's the idea behind the statistics of science. I personally think that short, just the short, not the whole thing, because I don't know, that short is a 0s and 1s moment about some person who might have nuance over it. When I watch the whole thing, that still have limited information because I don't know the person's life. But I would argue that in this case, there's a high likelihood that that person was speaking from a psychological and a philosophical point of view, not from a science point of view. When I think of science, I think of this, which is what I maybe is the most likely thing that I disagree with, in that what is inferred in that short. But I don't know the full context of what he was trying to argue. So that's kind of where we sit on that part. Anyways, now we have to get going here. You've got to go. Yeah, so you came back. Okay. Yeah. So we answered the rest. Like, I kind of try to throw in everything that we talked about before, like creatine and health, nutrition, and whatnot, and then threw in a little bit of my regular spice, which is like talking about net speak and generalizations and stuff. But yeah, I really it's good, I suppose. I don't understand. I didn't get too much out of the short other than that sounds fair. I think the one thing that was geared towards you that was new, Procall, now that you're back, is I don't want to discourage you from doing zeros and ones. I don't think it's bad or good. It's not, like, it's neither bad or good. The idea is that to me, it's not impressive. Like, I'm talking about myself. It's not impressive to poke holes in zeros and ones, and that's kind of what he did. And for me, that's my normal internet interaction. So whenever someone says like, oh, you are very good at breaking things down and explaining topics, you know, that someone had, but my first thought is it might seem that way, but generally speaking, when you're presented with a 0 and 1, it can sound very impressive if what you're talking about is everything between 0 and 1, the rest of it. So whenever someone asks like, oh, do you think Bunpro is the best app, right? The best app for Japanese grammar, right? So this person specifically had some keywords, and instead of saying it's the best, I would tell you as much about the other 0.99. So we would talk about Tae Kim's, even though I have very limited experience with Tae Kim's Tofuku site, right? We're making this about language learning now. Tofuku, right? We have the Genki textbook, the Mina Nihongo series of books. All of this stuff, when you talk about this stuff, it might seem impressive to someone who specifically only knows this. So they wanted to hear confirmation, right? Affirmation. Whenever someone comes on Twitch and say, when I'm playing Like a Dragon later on this month, right? Kiwami 3, someone could come by and say, yo, isn't RGG the best? And immediately what I would do is I would talk about everything else, right? Because I would say yes or no to this, and that's it. That's all they want. If I say yes, then that's all they're going to get. If I say yes, however, hear me out, there are all these other things, then you immediately start to sound impressive in a way because it includes other information. However, what I'm trying to say meta that is, when someone thinks about a lot of other things in a lot of other conditions, it is not impressive, as in it's not hard to do that, because these are two states, and then you have everything in between. And that's why when I watched that clip of him making a permanent refuting of defining science as an ideal situation in which he refutes it with his null, that's one state against another state. It makes it very uncomplicated. It uncomplicates things. It makes it easy to understand, clarify to understand, and in my opinion, an effective way to appear impressive, but really not significantly difficult to execute. So when you paint your opponent as zeros and ones, it can be easy to refute them and appear impressive online. Because in my opinion, most people weigh online agreements and disagreements and stuff as zeros and ones. Zeros and ones is the vast majority of interactions online. Largely because we have a lot of info, but not a lot of expertise. This includes me, by the way. This includes myself. In any way, when I'm interpreting info, it's usually closer to zeros and ones than it is an expert. So when you hear two experts like attack each other or critique each other, then it becomes very not this. But based on that clip and that interview, I would have to guess it was an interview and the host was simply listening to what he had to say. And to me, for myself, when you're trying to deliberately make your opponent ideal, it's what the first thing that I come to mind is like, well, I just happen to work in science in the past, and I can tell you, in my opinion, that if it was that simple, yeah, I think logically speaking, science is narrow-minded. I don't think science is that narrow-minded. So like, hey, my favorite, like, here's an example of language learning. Duolingo sucks. I use this all the time. Duolingo sucks, right? And then how do they prove that? Well, Duolingo doesn't have X, where X is in Y, and that's the thing they support. That can sound impressive online, but it tells me that this person did not do their homework, personally. Or there are other alternatives. They did their homework, but they want it to be attractive for NetSpeak. So if they did do their homework, I think it's a disservice to their experience. They not only do, this to me is opportunistic. And if I had to personally have an opinion of my own, when I look at this and they present this and they do not go into their experience, then this is either their inexperience or they want to appeal to NetSpeak, which is opportunistic. Those are the two. I'm not saying it's true. I'm saying it's highly likely that this is the case. They are either inexperienced or they prefer to be opportunistic. And I don't particularly resonate with either of those things. So when someone says something like, oh yeah, you should listen to this guy. They tell you a lot of things. Like, they tell you a lot of things. What does that mean? I look at the video and they basically say, here's the top 10 reasons you should do this. And I'm like, no, thank you. It's not that clear. Like, if I was truly looking for advice about something that I can't solve, it wouldn't be that easy. At least personally. That sounds like a little bit of an arrogant, humble brag or something, but I don't solve easy problems. I solve hard problems, or problems that I think are very hard. So when someone comes along and say, hey, your problem, it's easy to solve. Here's the first, follow these 10 steps and your problem will go away. It's like, if I were looking for a solution to this problem, it would not be your video. Your video is for people who are having problems with solving a problem, and you're treating me like an idiot by saying this is the easiest way to solve your complex problem that you're looking for, right? Now, other people may believe that they don't have time or they don't care about their problems. That's perfectly fine. So they can have easy problems for other people to solve because they prefer that they don't waste time on solving easy problems. That's fair. What's easy to me doesn't mean it's easy to the other person. But for myself, that is like idealistic thinking. Like, if you think that every problem is easy, then you believe that every easy video will solve your problems. I rarely ever think about that. So most of my problems that I would look on the internet to solve, most of them are hard problems. Because solving easy problems sound like a hoot and a half, actually. Like, I enjoy solving problems. So usually when I'm looking for info, I'm looking for info about the nuances of the easy problem, not the obvious things. Like, obvious things, I don't learn anything from that. Like, how do you learn Japanese? Study Japanese. It's like, how do you do that? Oh, come up with a consistent schedule. It's like, no kidding coming over because this is schedule. It's like, how do you do that? The video would end there. Like, that's kind of like the whole thing about top 10 things. First lesson, learn from your mistakes. No kidding. Absolutely no kidding. Learn from your mistakes. Really. Practice listening. You don't say that one of the top 10 things to learn Japanese is to practice listening. That's what I mean. This, to me, can appear impressive to someone who has an idealistic depiction of the thing they're inexperienced in, or just doesn't care that much. And that's perfectly fine because we all choose how we spend our time. I just don't prefer doing it this way. So I want to say that when someone tells me that I'm being impressively analytical or impressively when Procall, you and I have these interactions every once in a while where you think that sometimes you would say like, oh, I'm just being humble. I really do believe I'm not doing very much. Like, and that's not because I don't appreciate your compliments and whatnot, like your indirect compliments. It's like, imposter syndrome is a really big thing in my life. And oftentimes when I think about doing impressive things, like, for example, when I said I said that I was relatively educated, the recent one, relatively educated, was the word I was saying. And then you said, well, that certainly is a humble brag. It's like, well, no. And yes, the complicated nature is that educated is not a 0 and 1 state, right? And then I try to make a counter argument where, like, well, some people think of it as a 0 and 1 state. So I'm either educated or not educated. And I'm not educated if I don't know the thing the person cares about. That's how the internet works. So I'm well aware that the internet is binary. When I come in, like, for example, someone called me an idiot before and stupid for not understanding how deck builders work. Because what they observed is I read something, so I read a card and I messed up the text. It said 50% and I read it as a different percentage. And this person called me an idiot. It's like, hey, look, that's stupid. It's written in the card. Like, you're dumb. I'm like, okay, See, that's what the internet does. Like, it doesn't matter about the continuum of one's knowledge or experience. It's about that one instant. At one instant, I think there was a recent one. Oh, Mika did this 2 days ago. I was talking about the anime Frien to a new person named Mr. And she comes in and she says, "Whoa, wow, you mention Frien all the time. Like, you really love mentioning Freeren every opportunity you have." It's like, does that do you understand what it means to say every time? Do you know how many times I talk about anime and manga between the things? And she's like, "Well, you mentioned it like 2 days ago." And it's like, this is the thing we're referring to. And it's like, "Oh, well, you mentioned it to me 2 months ago." She probably like controlled F and looked at our discussions like, "Yeah, 2 months ago." And I'm like, "Yeah, and I also talked to Procall about it 6 months ago, and it's been 4 instances." Do you know how many times, how many opportunities exist in 6 months and 2 months time? And that means that I talk about it every time. That's asinine. And that's what I mean by the internet speak. Like, one instance gets to be paved by everything else. So when you make a mistake, it doesn't matter that 99% of the time you don't make a mistake. Or like when someone comes in and says, "Oh, hey, you got this wrong. You should study N5 stuff." I'm like, "What do you mean? I made an error." And then I corrected the error. It's like, "But you forgot this, so it obviously means you don't know any of the N5 stuff." Like, that's asinine. That is an incredible leap of logic, but that's how you operate. It's easier to operate in zeros and ones than everything in between. Does someone calling you stupid flare out your imposter syndrome? No, not really. It makes me want to tackle how they construed as stupid, because ultimately I want to know what they mean by stupid. Like, what do they mean by stupid? If I understand why they mean by stupid, then it helps me mitigate the imposter syndrome. So to do something unimpressive, you could kind of argue to do something unimpressive can maybe help with my imposter syndrome. So how does that work? So whenever someone like person X say, I always do something every time, right? When someone says, "Oh, I do this every time," then I would verify that. It's like, well, I did this 5 times in the last year, right? And if they can confirm that, which they did through their behavior, then I feel it keeps my imposter syndrome at bay, right? It tells me that the thing I know is at least true between the person who's calling me stupid and the person, and what my definition of stupid and their definition of stupid is. So like, if someone says they think I'm stupid because I made one mistake that they saw today, and that's how they define stupid, then I'm okay with that, right? Because it fits their definition. I don't have to attack them and their character or anything like that, because in the future, when they make a mistake, I hope that I hope that they're not calling themselves stupid. But for myself, I can rest assured that if their definition of stupid is making one mistake at any one time, that's fair enough. I fit their definition. You're going to look and listen to whatever else you say, but thank you for coming. Very thought-provoking as also. Best wishes for all your future endeavors. All right, Procol. Take care. I think this is a pretty good stop. Like, this is a pretty good stopping point. It happens. We have plenty of time. I accrue examples like these all the time. So Plenty of time to discuss these things. Feeling, maybe one last statement is feeling disappointed, excited, triggered and stuff is a healthy thing, in my opinion. Also, I don't know, I've strictly stuck to this will be my last one, but I'm used to being you're used to the branching conversations we have when one of us brings up a topic. Yeah. I mean, nowadays it's an inside joke, right? This will be the last thing we say. Fast forward like 7 hours later, it's like maybe this will still be the last thing we say. And let's not talk about finales, right? We're never talking about finales. Don't worry about it. Like, it's practically a joke now, right? You're saying this will be our last conversation. It will 99.9% of the time, it will not be our last conversation. Like, in every possible way, right? You know what I mean? Like, there's always a probability that we might have a conversation next, like right now, or a conversation tomorrow, the day after, until it's truly final. But since we don't really operate, at least in my opinion, I don't typically focus on what happens in the beginning or the end of something, because they only happen once in a lifetime, maybe, if at all that. It's pretty much a fun joke. Yeah, we both seem to have the same definition of the last, yeah. So that's one thing that I want to communicate today. If there's anything before you leave, Procall, that like Peterson clip highlights exactly how final things are. And I don't think things are zeros and ones. I think the beauty, right? The beauty is not zeros and ones. This represents, you know, such a small portion. The beauty is here. This is where beauty is. That's what life is, right? That's where science is, honestly. Like, most of the thing is, this is where science is. This is where all of our universe and stuff is. When you continue to spend time on zeros and ones, it can provide clarity. However, that's not what people share. Like, when you talk to someone else, if you start viewing everything in zeros and ones, it gets very dull and you run out of things to talk about, right? So we'll probably continue this cycle of conversation in the future. We're always talking about the thoughtfulness. This is the thoughtfulness. And that's why I really, if I had a critique about that short, it does Peterson a disservice. That cut does a disservice. It cuts out everything in between. So that, I mean, it fills itself. A lot of times shorts are unremarkable, and yeah, it's easier to say from your end, but you generally believe all of our conversation would be for yeah. So to me, I think one of the things that Peterson was wonderful about, like, you know, like, I hope they continue to be, and I wish for him the best of luck and recovery and whatnot, is that that's what happened. That very nature of a YouTube short and social media, right? Social media did him a disservice, in my opinion. It did him a disservice. The portrayal of him being idealistic and contradictory demeaned and debased his ability to do everything in the middle. So, and it's for net speak, it's for algorithm, it's for efficiency. And I think most people nowadays, when they talk about their aptitude and whatnot, they debase themselves. In my opinion, I know I'm painting some victim blaming here a little bit, but they debase themselves by reducing all of their arguments and their discussions, or quote unquote discussions, into statements, basically. How much have you seen of Peterson's content, just out of curiosity? I get thrown Peterson stuff a lot, and every once in a while I just delist don't recommend a channel, and then another channel will repost his stuff. What I mean is, I encounter his things because the nature of the stuff I watch will bring him up again. So every once in a while, I would like, wait till it comes back around. Every year, something is served to me by people who talk about rhetoric, right? Because I talk in rhetorics too, like the meaning of this, the meaning of that. In fact, the most recent Hank Green thing, his vlog, he just sold his company. It was titled, he sold his company for $0. I'll let you use your imagination what that means, but it's very rhetoric. Like there's a lot of rhetoric in it about value systems and whatnot, and that could still proc, like, I don't know, a Tyson video, like DeGrasse Tyson, like Neil stuff. Algorithms, when you have rhetoric and conversations and whatnot, will prompt Jordan Peterson's things, regardless of how old it is or how current it is, right? So it does happen quite often. And now I know who he is, though. Like I actually see his face and I know who the name is. I saw him before, but now I have a name to the face because other people mention his name a lot, along with your other ones. Like whenever you mention name, sometimes I might not recognize their name, but I probably seen their content. The algorithm does what the algorithm wants. All right, let's move along here. I think we're gonna do 50 exercises and then move to Hanzahiro because I do have to finish my P5X coverage today. Kind of running out of days and choices. Disappear. I'm still trying to figure out what the disappear is. To cease entirely. I wanted to say it could have been cut, but or maybe to end? No. Is it? Nope. That's to cut. We could stop. No. Money. It could be. No. 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 Geru? No. No. Geru? Geru.
財布からお金が消える。
Let's write something for this. Okay, hang on. That's to like to vanish or go out, something like that.
この建物の階段は古いです。
あなたにお子さんはいますか？
Oh, powered by engine. Oh no. To shift one position, yeah. Oh, to move.
車はエンジンの力で動きます。
彼と私は深い関係にある。
あの財布が欲しいです。
あなたは警察官ですか？
What?
妻が夫に卵を1パック買ってきてください。
Yeah, you gotta get some rest because you got nowhere with recovering your granddad's files. Oh, and your dad got back from his ski trip, if you remember. Yeah, yep, the ski trip. They're going around your dad's to try and combine your nerve powers to figure out, oh, is your dad technologically inclined? I feel like I'm... That's very sweet. That, like, your dad, like you and your parents, like at least, you know, one of your parents have a common thing. I don't share anything with my parents. Is he what inclined? Oh, like technologically inclined. Like there's something about my relationship with me and my parents. We basically don't share anything. And I always wondered, obviously it's not too late to do so. So when my mother retires, I would love to like have the attempt or time to try to share some experience. My parents and I, it's kind of one of those things about immigration. Your children, me and my sister, live entirely different lives from our parents, so it can create like a impasse a lot of times. Extremely, he said that at 14 he took an extreme love of coding. Well, there you go. That sounds wonderful. Like it is something that I find incredibly romantic. Maybe a little bit rose-colored goggles or the grass is greener situation. When I hear, you know, other people have this connection with their parents, it's interesting. The thing that I have connect with my parents aren't really grounded in that type of thing. It's more like duty, tolerance, stoicism, like expectations, scrutiny, the stuff that's not necessarily tangible, right? It's not quite tangible in a way. So you don't have like everyday interactions where like, oh yeah, let's go in. The closest thing I have possibly is like go to Costco with my parents. That's probably the closest thing. Like go to Costco. Which
鉛筆の先は細いです。
I mentioned this because 2 days ago I did actually go to Costco with my father. And do you know how long it took to go to Costco? 9 minutes. Not 10, 9 minutes. We went in. He went straight back to the back produce section, like the fresh section. He looked at all the cuts of fish, right? And the moment he stopped to look at the cut of fish, I immediately darted to look for kimchi, like kimchi. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's what they have for kimchi. He somehow found me immediately, like after he spent like 5 minutes, and we both left right after that. That's it. We bought one slab of fish, and I looked at the selection, and we were out. That's something we share, basically. Like my father and I, like I am my father's son, so so to speak. So we both have this like incredibly exacting behavior response. My mother, on the other hand, if like that's you know where it gets that whole stereotyping behavior, then the trip would be like lots of nagging and complaining and talking about prices and what to get and meandering, you know, the very nature of the stereotypes online when you portray like a female, like Asian, for example, often the Asian persuasion. You would go into Costco, and instead of buying one item, it would be like 30 items, and like 10 of the items would be the things they taste tested during the Costco. And my father would do the same, right? And when it's me and my father, it's like the times doesn't last very long. And that's the whole nature. You don't know if you'll ever be as good as him as coding. Oh, interesting. But he has said that your uni coding is already getting out of his reach. Dang. Well, that one must be a very lovely sight for him, or a great feeling, in my opinion. If you know, I'm projecting a little bit, but he's being humble as he's never tried to learn Python. He's a whiz at JavaScript. Oh, Java, still relevant today. You got your mom to understand print statements in Python. Oh, nice. Good print. Yeah. Your mom had an incredible laughing fit today when I said that me and dad enjoys coding. She just finds it ridiculous. Yeah. Like, I think those are very treasured things, like, to be happy about. Like, if we're in a car, right? If we're driving, my father and I would say nothing, and like 90% of the time it would be something my mother is saying. Like that's it. Like we would drive on a corner and she would notice, like, oh, the grass is greener on that same house that she drives by on a daily basis, and then it would be the discussion for the next 90% of the trip, right? And my father and I would say quite literally nothing. I'm genuinely not kidding when I say that I speak when I plan to speak most of the time. I prepare when speaking is required, but generally speaking, like, I don't want to give people the false impression that if you see me in IRL, that I suddenly I behave differently. I'm not beating around the bush. I do behave differently when it's appropriate. When I'm in real life, I don't want to be. I'm not I'm not here. I'm not there for intervention. I don't stick my nose where things don't belong, and I do wait for people to initiate. And if they are in need of help, I would initiate in a different way, right? It represents its conditions, and I think it's very important to keep that in mind, largely because a large majority of people believe that life is always 100% on and off, zeros and ones when it comes to interacting. And that's what makes IRL different from the internet. But at the same time, in order to appreciate that, one would actually have to behave differently IRL and the internet. And that's what I actually do. But when someone says, like, I don't understand why IRL can't be the same as online, it's like, well, do you behave like it's the same? Because it can. That can happen. The idea is I don't know how to do that, because personally I don't, and that's why I'm healthy, right? Like with my things, I believe in reality things operate differently. So like, if you're wondering, oh man, Maku must be catatonic if he goes to Costco in like 5 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. Like, oh, wouldn't he just like go into every store and ramble about every single thing? It's like, no, I wouldn't. That would make me very non-functional in IRL situations. So no, I don't spend 6 hours talking about whether I should or should not buy that bottle of kimchi because I have an existential crisis with spending money on food. It's like, I buy it and I leave. It's stream is for the sake of discussion, and I often say this time and time again, of course, to remind everyone, like, I come on here to stream and discuss. If I were coming on here just to study, I wouldn't stream at all, because the most pragmatic way to study is not to have side-loaded discussions with people. So that's kind of, I stick by the words that I mentioned, you know. That's how you stay happy. You don't perpetuate cognitive dissonance with your actions and behaviors over and over again. You can still use it every once in a while to see like your problems or what the extent of your tolerance is.
ここに青い糸があります。
But generally, too much of that can erode one's like contentment with life, I suppose.
先月の父の日には手紙で感謝を伝えました。
I had this very discussion yesterday with someone. Which happy are we talking about here? Being content in one's life, that still describes happy. Long lasting. Okay, that's long lasting. That's an important key. Because the long lasting one is whoops.
あなたは幸せですか？
Also, did I hydrate when it? Yeah, I did. Hydrated more than one. It will stop raining? Huh. Oh, okay.
雨が上がる。
Right. Let up. In a sense. The rain will let up is how I would say that in order to remember agaru. もちろんね。Oops.
もちろん、その意見には賛成です。
彼の横に座る。
ママ友との会話。 今
What time?
年は息子の受験があるんです。
It's a different arrive. Oh, it's not. Just
荷
kidding.
物が来ます。
Maybe save the proper answer for another time, but if you drink too much water and your cells are swelling, is consuming salt a good way to balance it out? Yeah. Outside of like the sheer volume of other things, yeah. Salt's good. Yeah. No complete answer, but osmotic pressure, right? Osmotic pressure is how water is taken in, right? And that's also how water flows out. And obviously this is very general, but you're constantly thinking about osmotic pressure when it comes to water in and water out. So if salt environment goes up, water comes out. If water goes up, right, water goes in, right? The whole idea is osmotic pressure. And salt is the classical way of saying eat something that will affect the osmotic pressure of your exterior of your cells. Now, there's also the consideration of volume, which I'm not entirely sure how that works with the things, but typically that's a fairly nice rule of thought to have. The reason why I'm saying about the swelling thing is the volume causes cell swelling. However, there's also a situation where all your salt gets drawn out of your, like, you can have like salt deficiency, like from the osmotic pressure. So they're two separate things, but they kind of go hand in hand. Your cells swelling up from the intake of water, but there's also a dilution of your salt. So consuming salts can operate, and this is not for like professional advice, but can affect two things: the salt concentrations, which is necessary for human function as well, like your signaling, conduction, and all that, as well as the literal volume. The literal volume can more or less do detriments. It's kind of like the whole idea of your brain swelling and it's pressing against your skull and whatnot. That type of thing can happen due to swelling. So volume itself can cause damage, necrotic damage, but also salt related conduction, right? Which is a lot more extreme a lot of times, but it's still an effect. So when you're like low on salts, right? When you sweat a lot, the fatigue might not necessarily simply come from hydration. It's also coming from salt deficiency, from losing the salt. So both, it would help. It would likely do a bit of both. You also wonder whether drinking water when you're drunk is useless due to alcohol being a diuretic, but apparently diuretic doesn't just make water pass through without being used. Yeah, it doesn't. Mm-hmm. That is correct. Yeah. It would be, it has other things, right? It carries other things. Like the most would have things to do with like your salt levels and your other bodily functions other than specifically the water itself. You know? Personally, if you're feeling like really, the diuretic is because of the flushing of nutrients and things as well. So when you're like inherently when you're aggressively removing water from your system, which is the diuretic, it comes with all the nutrients and all the circulating molecules and minerals that is part of the water system too. Is salt the most important electrolyte to consume the morning after a night out drinking? That's a good question. I don't know, but it is certainly the most accessible. Yeah, I think electrolytes are the most accessible. So that's nice, right? You could say most important would also mean like adherence, right? Adherence and accessibility. You're asking for a friend. I think a lot of times whenever we think about best or like most important, we kind of think about best or like efficaciousness, right? And I think for me, this is not nutritional advice, obviously. Best or efficacious, I often think about, can you do it? Like, how often can you do it? Having like Gatorade lying around and like sports drinks or like drinks that are meant with like, they have like salt or they technically have unnecessary salt, like excess salt and stuff, because a lot of people drink without being like in that form of dehydration and whatnot. Adherence and accessibility is really high. So I would argue that because of that, having something like a electrolyte solution is something that is all going to be easily adherent and easily accessible. Like sometimes even the best kind of treatment and diet and materials, if you have poor adherence and poor accessibility, it's irrelevant how effective it is. You don't form a habit of recovering. So oftentimes leaving a bottle of Gatorade around, or even though you don't drink Gatorade habitually, they last like for a really long time. That type of stuff is really wonderful to keep. Like my parents, sometimes my mother experience, like my parents are older, so they have a lot of GI related things, so they could experience diarrhea, for example, like upset stomach, like that type of thing, and it can expel a lot of water out of them very quickly. So we typically have like 2 or 3 bottles on the table. They're just sitting there, and it would be like electrolyte solutions or Gatorade or something. And typically like Gatorade, a bottle of Gatorade or whatnot. And that is usually what you go for. You try to replenish the salt and the water, because excess water loss carries pretty much all the other stuff. That's why I mentioned osmotic pressure, right? Osmotic pressure is the salt concentration. It's a salt concentration. So the salt carries the water. I know it's awkward to say that because most people think it's the water that carries the salt, but it's the salt concentration that facilitates the direction of the water in your body, right? It's osmotic pressure. And this is a fun chemistry. It's like a fun first year chemistry thing for people who like go into like a liberal arts college and they have to take a science course, and one of them is recommended that they would take chemistry and or biology or something like that. At least one half semester of biology and half semester of chemistry, but not in science. The understanding of osmotic pressure is counterintuitive for most people because it is the salt concentration that drives the direction of water, not the water that carries the salt. So therefore it's the direction of water, it's the direction of concentration of salt. It's with respect to the salt concentration. That means that water and the salt gets carried at the same time. They don't like suddenly separate from each other. There's no filter or something like that. Well, there is, but that's a little complicated. You've heard body is incredible at recovering from one-offs, even extreme ones, and that is its consistent use that our body struggles. Yeah. And rarely ever underestimate how robust the body is. Is it the salt concentration relative to water concentration, meaning it goes both ways? It's salt concentration relative to salt concentration. That's salt con here, salt con here. It is both of these are relative to water because the salt concentration is dependent on water. So like if the concentration is high here, water flows this way. It's the relative salt concentrations. You have salt concentration inside the cell and outside the cell. That's why osmotic pressure is counterintuitive. You're measuring the relative salt concentrations between the inside and the outside. What is the wall diagram? Oh, this is the membrane, the cell membrane. I use the double layer just to represent the membrane most of the time. But the idea is you're going because of the relative salt concentrations. Water travels or where it's higher concentration of salt. Now, how that works in the body requires context. So it requires context to know when you consume more salt or something, how does that pull in direction? And that to me is a little bit murky, so I don't want to go into that because I'm pretty sure I'm going to get it wrong, or like I'm gonna get it mixed up because you have to like, how does it go from, you know, your gut, right? Or not your gut, but like maybe like your kidneys, right? Your kidneys, and then it has to go over one barrier, and then that's your blood, you know, your blood supply or something, and then in the cells it goes through another membrane. Like which side has the higher concentration, which side doesn't when you congest. I'm not going to go into that because I actually am unsure what happens in the dynamics. The result is that when you take in electrolytes, it helps hydrate your body because it has a effect on the places that it affects to cause water to enter into your system across the barrier. So how does which direction it is, probably want to ask like a nutritionist or someone who does that, because I really did not think those things through at all. This is where I do zeros and ones, right? Zeros and ones. When you ingest electrolytes, your water hydration goes up. That's my zeros and ones moment. All the stuff in between, it's murky at best. Murky at best. Colder. Whoops.
絨毯の床よりフローリングの床の方が冷たい。
Yeah, osmotic pressure is cool. Doing experiments outside is really cool. Like here's one, you know, baby powder. Oh, or talcum powder, is that the word? Yeah, talcum. Right? Talcum powder? Something like that. Talcum powder, it has a high absorption because it lacks quote-unquote water. And also maybe like it might be hydrophilic. There's also hydrophilicity and hydrophobicity as well. But the idea is some object that has a very high concentration of itself, whether it is hydrophilic or hydrophobic, then it would absorb water. Right? It could be a high concentration of something hydrophobic, and that's a different story. But if you have a high concentration of a hydrophilic compound, that would also mean that it also has a low concentration of water. And when you expose it to water, if it's both hydrophilic or it lacks water, like high surface area and whatnot, it can accommodate water very rapidly. But most of the time, it's more like, let's say you have a solution. Let's say you have a beaker, right? And you have a like a filter in between. A filter in between, and it filters everything. You have a concentration of like, I don't know, 0.5 molar salt over here, and then you have a 1 molar salt over here, and if they're not permeable to each other, right, they can't not permeable, and you put in like a specific volume of water, you'll notice that the water will probably be higher over here. I think that's how that works. Don't quote me on this. But the idea is that water will go towards the higher concentration side in order to equilibrate its stuff. So like, oh, I shouldn't say 1 mole, but like, let's just say 1 gram, because it's a little different. The mole would be a concentration, so like say 0.5 grams. And then what happens is the molarity will equalize. As in, this level will raise up to a point where it would equalize their molarity, which it was mole. So that's like how much in a volume, like moles per volume. So that's kind of how osmotic pressure works, where if you're gonna have something that's permeable to the solution, their concentrations will equilibrate with each other, and that could affect it if the salt avocado. Wait, why are you saying avocado? Oh, is that? Wait, can you explain the avocado thing? I'm trying to see where the avocado thing is. Constant. Oh, I see. Oh, avogadros. Oh, avocado. Okay, I got you. Yes. Avocado. Yes. I never thought of it that way. Wait, are you trying to say Avogadros and then you accidentally said avocado, or are you making a funny joke? Because I think that's pretty funny to remember Avogadro's number, like the conversion constant for molarity and like moles, grams and moles. Avocado is pretty funny if that was your intent.
この民家の戸は古くて小さいです。
I lend? Oh.
友達に鉛筆を貸す。
Oops.
あなたのお姉さんが気をつけてって言っていました。
It was a thing in your school for GCSEs? Okay, and you think it started because someone misheard the name? Oh, that's cute. Avocado is great. Avocado wasn't very trendy when I was growing up, so it didn't quite catch. But now it's a great way to remember his name. Honestly, I don't even know how to spell Avogadros. Avogadros or avocado. Good. What was my acronym for life in school? There's an acronym for life?
「熱があるときはお風呂に入らない方がいい」。
生徒、寒いのでエアコンのスイッチを切ってもいいですか？
What? Oh, I keep typing.
進路指導の先生。あなたは看護師を目指した方がいいよ。
My eye is double actuating. Which important are we talking about? Oh no, requires special attention. Wait. I feel like maybe it's like oh. Oh no, that's something else. Or
あなたにとって大事なものは何ですか？
私の好きな色は黄色やオレンジ、ピンク。
let's use the Oh god, hi.
若者は風邪からの回復が早い。
この酒は強いです。
男性、あなたには彼氏がいますか？女性、はい、います。
Information in case it's it's usually when A and B are logically connected, it often implies that A is the reason to cause the B. Okay. So
彼に殴られた、それに蹴られた。
okay. I see. We're getting a little bit better at that. Oh, wait.
あなたは去年何歳でしたか？
Every time I type sennen. I thought I had...
親が子供に、
Okay.
絶対に警察に嘘をつくな。
Something else. It's like Shumi, but it's me. It's a different me. Oh, it's Kyomi. Kyomi.
母。あなたは何に興味があるの？娘。
In that direction.
交番はそちらです。
And I look up, as in like up. Okay.
顔を上げてくれますか？
Oops.
生徒、僕はいい子じゃないので宿題をやりませんでした。
By the way, it's like Kokoro de. And then this
趣味
is
を仕
Shumi.
事にするのは良いアイデアじゃない。
兄弟と図書館へ勉強をしに行く。
あの町は汚い。
まだ宿題をしていないので寝ません。
Alright, we did 50. That's all time we have. Oh, we have our, our Ruden Tuen discussions. Oh, does this actually lead straight to the... Yeah, it does. Neat! They do these announcements. I'll probably do that in a bit. Alright, folks. We had one, right? One that is kind of on my radar right now. And that is Kieru. And Kieru... I think it's this one, Kieru. Disappear. And let's go look. Double check. Oh no! Oh, wrong. Yeah. That is not the one. That is not the right character. What was my drawing? And then Ru. I don't know how you forgot to say, I saw this guy on TikTok who's always streaming when you're scrolling TikTok. He reminds me of you from what you watch, but he's got an English accent? What the heck? Oh, wait. You sure he's not Australian? Oh, but he's always streaming. That guy's not a streamer, though. He does stream sometimes, but he doesn't stream all the time. English accent person. Interesting. Wonder who it is. I know a couple people who are Australian who may sound like me, but I guess it depends on what you mean by, or how, or like he reminds me, like in what way. Because there are actually people, yeah, you're sure he's a small streamer like you in terms of you, so I doubt you would. Oh, okay. Because there are people that do exactly what I do, but honestly more professionally and more fine-tuned, and so like they do sometimes stream as well, but they're streaming to demonstrate this. So there's legitimately a guy who does this professionally, but they also stream to capture a live study session. But they're not streamers. They simply do social experiments where they would stream to demonstrate the execution of their theories. I do the opposite, obviously. I stream for the sake of being the principal thing, and then maybe I will write something and produce something as coherent. There are quite a few of those people, and for whatever reason, coincidentally, they happen to all be Australians. They happen to be Asian, by the way. So like what I mean is reminding you of like that person reminding you, they also happen to also be Asian, but I haven't come across someone who's American who like speaks with an American accent. Most of them are either English, Aussie. They're usually English or Aussie at this point. Coincidentally, I think the vast majority of like Hank and John are the most American of the Americans that I know, and they don't even do this stuff. A lot of the self-help stuff and like the learning and strategy stuff, people they aren't American speaking that I'm aware of. You can't remember his name on TikTok. It's been on the tip of your tongue for minutes. Yeah, I also, you said you're scrolling through TikTok. I don't know anyone from TikTok because I don't have a TikTok account, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, but I don't have anything TikTok related, so the chances of me knowing this person period would be non-existent since I don't interact with TikTok, unless that person double posts their content on YouTube. That is one very large exception. Despite being small, I think small could be less of a factor. Yeah, I use YouTube Shorts because it kind of just covers both. And that's not because I'm not interested in TikTok. Trust me, I suppose this is a trust me bro situation. I'm interested when I'm motivated to be interested. However, social media, it's not like people are coming at me and say like, hey, how do I access and understand social media's impact on my own behavior and quality of life? I'm like, I don't have to do that. You probably have plenty of information at your hands. So the interest comes from me being able to contribute, right? So when someone understands, when the motivation that I typically talk about when someone says like, why don't you do this? It's like, I'm not properly motivated to do it. It's like, what do you mean by properly motivated? Aren't you like interested in everything? It's like, yes, but the most predominant reason why I'm motivated is because I have something I can do to offer to help someone. That's the main motivation. That's motivation beyond my own motivations. I have enough in my life. I don't need to add more to it. Like what I mean is, I don't need to add more social media to my life. it is only motivated through the idea of being able to transform it in a way with another person that I would ever contemplate about adding more things that are extraneous to my life. Which is like being aware that there are other people who stream on TikTok. That doesn't necessarily enrich my life. But it would be interesting to see this particular person that reminds that we share similarities with. I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. And if that person like breaks out and gets really famous or something, that would be kind of an interesting social experiment. Because genuinely speaking, if anyone reminds me of me, would be someone that would not be discovered by me. You see what I mean about that, Procol? Do you find this a little poetically comical in a way? Like, I don't seek me, so I don't find people like me. But serendipitously, if they're famous enough or they're influencing enough, it's usually because of their differences that I come across them. So like I talk about John and Hank Green a lot, but it is the differences that are most notable about why we are different. And that's how I came across them. I came across them because they were different from me. But generally speaking, if I ever cross paths with myself, it would be probably because they're helping the same common interest. But generally speaking, my personality would make me unlikely to know someone like me. So, to go in a roundabout way of explaining, if you ever come across someone who is like me or like someone who reminds you of me, it's fairly safe to assume I probably don't know that person. Because the statistics is that people, at least if I can understand myself well enough, this is a little bit of a prove me wrong situation. You could challenge me at any time to prove me wrong. But generally, I don't go around bumping into me. If there are people that are genuinely like me out there, the odds are that I would not cross paths with them, because the most common place to cross paths is that if that person is very much like me, we would coincidentally be helping the same cause, and because of the same cause, there's a chance we might cross paths. But if I know myself well enough, most of my characteristics make me not want to interact with myself. Like, I genuinely do believe that. I don't like talking to myself. If I wanted to be really serious, whenever someone says like, oh yeah, I'm self-deprecating, I hate myself or something, I learn to come to terms with myself. So in that way, I don't want people to be like me. That's kind of like the whole point of this. I want people to be like you. I want you to be successful in your own way. I want you to have the abilities to find that. Now, the abilities could be similar, but the personality and all that stuff, like meeting me sounds like a disaster. Why do you think you look for the differences over the similarities for celebrities? Because I don't have qualities that would make me a celebrity. That's like I'm not saying that I'm unlucky and lucky. I'm saying that I chose to do things that are not sharing those similarities of people. Like, what makes John and Hank possible for me to come across them is the differences. And one of the differences could be fortune. It could be serendipity, as well as the difference between us. Because the personalities that are required to be me requires that they don't seek those things. So they would need luck and fortunateness, or even have specific abilities that make them more likely to be known. That's kind of like trying to understand myself well. Like, it is if someone is a small streamer who has a little lick of care and most of the things they do are out of passion and like they are not depressed and they have like a lot of accolades to their name but no one knows about them, that's getting closer to why I mean by I don't look for it. It's probably likely the case that the differences is what makes them popular and whatnot, because a lot of the choices that I make, they're not conducive to having wide influence. So if they become popular, it would be interesting to study them, because if they were like me and suddenly they made changes, it would be interesting to see how that manifests. Generally speaking, like Hank and John mentioned this sometimes, it is through their act of passion that they might have drawn a lot of attentions, but it's also those things that they do that I don't do. Like as much as I want to write a book, I also have an incredible fear of it, and that's a similarity I kind of share with John Green. But John Green wrote those books. He did do those things. He was able to. I was not able to. Or not able to yet. And like Hank did companies and like he did things that brought him in line with all the new things he had to deal with. So do you try and seek the qualities celebrities have, or is it more of a general approach of trying to get the differences between you and others? Similarities and differences, both. The idea is to inform myself of what ifs, right? What ifs, what I can do, ideas. Ideas are ideas. They have to be outside of myself. So, but they have to be in the context of the similarities. So it is only being able to understand the similarities that you understand the differences, and vice versa. It's not because they're separate things. Like, so in order to appreciate the differences between like what Hank and John does from my capacity to do quote unquote similar things, is that it is understanding how I'm able to probably be able to do those similar things that the differences shine. You more meant was a celebrity an actual desire for you, or just an example? You said the word celebrity. I said like having popularity or having presence. So you can be influential and not be a celebrity. So there's no actual desire to be a celebrity. Celebrity is a very particular thing. Being lucky and being noticed, that's not celebrity. That's like producing legacy. So legacy is not just an example. It pays pretty much most things in later life. So legacy is very important. So it's not just an example. It is one of the human conditions, building legacy. Being a celebrity is an example of a legacy, but I don't consider, and I don't know John and Hank consider themselves that way. But they do talk about it. They do talk about how others may perceive them as celebrities from time to time. They do talk about it pretty in a funny situation where they would say like, yeah, not for me, but it was fun while it lasted, or like they appreciate it when it happens, but they certainly do not see it as celebrity things. Influence is it comes with pros and cons, and they were able to manage it. Yeah, being influential is good. It allows you to have a greater impact, right? Feel the impact of things. Whether that'll happen in the future, I don't know. I'm not particularly striving to be influential. That is not the primary driver of understanding people's differences and similarities. Understanding differences and similarities, comparing and contrasting, is the main goal. So it just happens that whatever I currently do does not make one very influential in this landscape. Like, streaming, if you have chosen streaming, being influential requires qualities that I do not exercise. Not that I can't do them or I don't know what they are. It's good to know what they are for the very reason of comparing and contrasting. So like I know what they are because I've seen them. Whether I act on them is what separates, in my opinion, is what I believe separates between me and someone who's very influential. So it would be interesting to know if how someone gets there, because obviously I can't really tell if no one demonstrates it. Like Hank and John Green started somewhere. Most people started by not being influential. They had to become influential at some point in their lives. And since I'm not a personal friend of theirs, or I don't know them in any capacity on a personal level, it's interesting to see how they when they're there, what they do with it. We might have a different discussion in the future, maybe like maybe another 10 years when it might be different. Who knows? The landscape might change. I think ultimately, though, to be incredibly realistic, I myself would have to be noticeably different, changing up things noticeably to really have influence. Like influence comes from building things and creating things that have some part of your imagery. I would say that's a very conservative statement about having influence, right? You would require something that creates influence. This is this is me being the most potentially influential that I can ever be in my entire life. Like if I continue to do what I thought I was going to do, that also had a potential for influence. Hank and John actually talked about these things. I know I raised their name a lot because they talk about the same things. Like the thoughts are very similar. However, what they're being able to do is the idea of increasing your influential potential while keeping true to your major motivations. And one of the greatest motivations that I enjoy about watching Hank and John Green talk about their things is that they're not necessarily doing it for clout. Do you think if your personality was more aggressive and less calm, for lack of better words, do you think it would gain more than you lose? If so, to what extent your personality changing would be ideal if you were in a game designing your character? Oh, like a hypothetical? You don't have to be aggressive and less calm. You can choose contexts that elicit more attention, which is what Hank does very effectively. Like I'm very politically, you can say calm, right? Calm is also meaning safe. Safe is also another way to stay calm. How does one stay calm more often is to also be relatively agreeable. However, Hank and John, the things that make them incredibly influential are not necessarily the things that are agreeable. They're more things that are, I guess you could say, aggressive in their context. So like John's campaign for tuberculosis, TB treatment, and then Hank's campaign for highly accessible, curated information. Those are very influential. They're very important in the state of things. Learning Japanese while in a very niche community, like the people that I talk about, they would say, oh yeah, learning Japanese is very important and trendy. It's like a drop in the bucket, right? Talking about climate change, that doesn't elicit more skills from me, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't need more skills to change the content. If I talk about climate change, I talk about immigration policy and enforcement, that's what the internet predicates on. I don't have to develop new skills to be able to analyze and talk about that. So that's where I resonate with like Hank Green and John Green. The ability to analyze and converse is still there. That the intellectual pursuit of understanding and negotiating is still there. The content is where they chose carefully, I would say, quite carefully, but they also chose to take up that mantle, which is great. Like, if I keep talking about science, that's not necessarily going to raise like crazy things. It's the nature of that science. So if I start talking about like diet fads or misinformation in fitness and nutrition, then that would create influence, because the influence is affected by its impact factor. My skills, I wouldn't need to develop new skills for that. I simply pick up the content that is necessary. Like, for example, I'm a commentator. I constantly refer to myself as a commentator. So I can commentate on controversial things. If you're wondering what are my evidence for this, it's not like I chose any content that's controversial. I do have controversial content relative to my control. What is my control? Language learning is my control, right? And even within language learning, what is my control? My first control is actually Duolingo. And if you're wondering, how did Duolingo compare to the less controversial things like Wanikani? Duolingo is like 10x that. Like, even relatively speaking, it's the internet is driven by content, not the execution of a skill. It's not like my skill changed dramatically between Duolingo and Wanikani. I didn't actually get smarter or become more skilled at something. It was the subject matter of Duolingo. And then if I say Duolingo like 60 more times in this video itself, it might actually end up on the algorithm more than constantly saying Bunpro, because you're transcribed. Most of the stuff you say are transcribed now on YouTube. So like the videos that I mention specific things, like when we talk about specific things, very specific topics that we talk about, those videos get more views, even though they're like 8 hours long. They get more views than the videos that I simply do not talk about. So because now we have machine learning, right? Machine learning picks up transcripts. Transcripts can be served to the things. So if you keep dropping bombs like immigration, prejudice, racism, if you keep dropping those bombs with a very specific proper noun or something, then you'll get more influence. Your things become more potential for influence. There's others, like for example, I played over 15 RGG games, but one video on one day in Neverwinter gets more views than almost the entire collection of RGG games. And we're not even talking about, I'm not talking about like millions of views versus like 100,000 views. We're talking about like hundreds of views versus one. view, or 5 views, or 10 views. The collection of my Neverwinter videos, which I don't particularly say very much different from the other times. Like, I talk about a lot of controversial topics. Even then, like a lot of controversial topics during RGG games, because RGG games are about organized crime. It's about depiction of a romanticized yakuza lifestyle of past in Japan, right? There's violence in it and all of that stuff. It still pales in comparison to doing something that have inherently controversial people in it, people who are interested in that type of thing. So I do have very notable statistical data. You agree? You feel like it's fairly easy to gauge whether someone is doing it right due to genuine intent to share information versus someone conveying information to gain something other than the satisfaction of knowing the information you share has been learned by others. Yeah. Has the promo bot shown up yet? I haven't seen it in a while. The promo bot? Oh, if they show up, then I would just... You shouldn't be able to see anything. Like, I've automatically filtered them out a bit ago. I still mention it if it shows up. And it's been a while, actually. It's been a while since the promo bot showed up on a daily basis. It's more like on a every 3 or 4 day basis now. So Twitch... I gotta thank Twitch, because Twitch is maybe something changed. Who knows? I joke about it all the time. Like, I would make a comment under my undertones like, oh, hey, 1 second, I gotta ban this bot. One day, Twitch, one day. That's what I say now, like, from time to time. But I haven't seen it in some time now. Not that it means that Twitch did something about it, but I would like... My wishful thinking is that Twitch did do something about it. Not that it changes much. It's okay. All right, I'm gonna move on to Hanzuhiro for now. So, all right, guys, that's a wrap for Bunpro today. I know we're somewhat... we'll catch up once we're not trying to finish P5X stuff. This week we're basically just negotiating this number until, or this month we're basically negotiating this number until we complete our other projects. There are quite a lot of them this month. All right, so if you're gonna watch this later, arigatou gozaimasu, right? As always, feel free to follow along, pick up Bunpro for yourself, give it a try. You're always welcome to come on by and talk about things, much like this session. It was interesting. We get to push the boundaries of our understanding and discussion, and it's always priority number 1. Discussion and like conversation. All of this other stuff is negotiable because it's one of the flavors. Language learning is the context of the purpose of, I guess, whatever I'm trying to build here, and it will continue to be that way until next time. For those who are interested in Bunpro, minasan mata ne, mite kurete arigato. Right, see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. I'm gonna get up, walk around, take a quick bathroom break, and I'll be back with Hanzuhiro. Thank you.